So apparently you can add having a boyfriend to women's ick list. This is a piece that has gone viral in Vogue. It's an opinion piece that is titled "Is Having a Boyfriend Embarrassing Now?" And the woman who wrote this piece is making the case that younger women, so Gen Z, millennial women, especially those who are on social media, find it embarrassing to be partnered up with someone, to have a boyfriend. And this is only contributing to a broader narrative that's emerging that women are just better off being single, or even, lamenting heterosexual relationships and rejecting those altogether. So let's dive in. So she talks about how this is becoming a thing, and that it's confusing to her because on social media, and again, this is all from the perspective of social media. I think this is important to keep in mind. She says, on the more confusing end, you have faces blurred out of wedding pictures or entirely professionally edited video photos with the fiance conveniently cropped out of all shots. Women are obscuring their partner's face when they post as if they want to erase the fact they exist without actually not posting them. This is a perfect example of why social media is so toxic, especially for the women's sphere, because it creates narratives that aren't necessarily based on reality, and they don't consider contrarian opinions. And because of that, these niche opinions are amplified by influencers and social media personalities and the algorithms. And it makes it seem like what is happening in the women's sphere is more rational and normal than it really is. Like, the idea of being embarrassed by having a boyfriend or a fiance or a husband or whatever, like, that is just so absurd. But she calls attention here, and her evidence is, well, women are obscuring their partner's faces when they make posts on social media. And I don't think it's dawned on the author of this essay that maybe that's because the men in these women's lives don't want to be on social media. I mean, you're never going to see a picture of my husband unless he explicitly gives me permission to post a picture of him. That is because he is a grown man who has agency and control over how his likeness and his image is portrayed in the world. He doesn't have social media. I don't post private information about my personal life. There's a reason for that. There are some women who do, and they choose to, and that's their prerogative. Other women blur things out or don't want to show their family because they want to protect their privacy. And I would just like think about this from the reverse. Okay, so this is looking at the picture at the perspective of, okay, so you're the woman consuming content produced by other women, and either the significant other is blurred out, or maybe you're just getting a hand or like a back shot. You're not getting the full view. She says here, you get a hand on the steering wheel, clinking glasses at dinner, or the back of someone's head. Okay, well, let's reverse roles here. Let's imagine that the dude in the relationship is the influencer, and the woman is being commoditized by the dude to produce content that man is then selling to enrich his own life. Like I've already talked about this in other videos. Like, it's clear women are increasing their economic value through the work they do, but they're not equitably sharing that value within their relationship. So women are making a lot of money, some through social media, some just through normal 9-to-5 jobs, but they're not like taking the money they're earning and investing it into their households and their relationships. Okay, so right off the bat, like, there's an exploitation factor here. So if you're the dude taking pictures of your girlfriend, your wife, or whatever, and then posting them to social media so you can become an influencer, so you can get those brand deals, so you can get ad revenue, whatever, right off the bat, that is exploitative, especially if that man, or if that individual, so in this case the woman, didn't give permission, right? Didn't give permission for you to do that. I think, like, the woman's sphere is obsessed with consent. Everything has to be about consent. But I don't think the kids who are being blasted on social media, on like family channels, or the men of those channels, I don't think they were asked for their consent to become commodities on social media, and that their likeness is now being exploited on Instagram or TikTok or whatever, so that the woman can generate revenue for herself that she is then going to in turn spend on herself. I think it's an incredibly exploitative. So when you see a cropped picture or someone blurred out, maybe it's because that person is being considerate about the privacy of the other person and recognizing just because they are on social media and they are posting about things doesn't mean their significant other also wants to be on social media. And I think that is incredibly important, and it's totally lost on women. So she says, what gives? Are people embarrassed by their boyfriends now? Or is something more complicated going on? To me, it feels like the result of women wanting to straddle two worlds. One where they can receive the social benefits of having a partner, but also not appear so boyfriend obsessed that they come across as quite culturally loserish. Like, I don't even know where she's getting this from. And maybe like part of this is me because I'm not on Instagram or TikTok, so I'm not in this culture. But this seems just insane to me. So they want the social benefits of having a partner. That seems paradoxical because there don't seem to be any social benefits to being coupled. Like, you look through all the feminist narratives and they're just complaining all the time about how they have to bear the mental load all by themselves, that they have to keep their kin and they're responsible for maintaining family relationships, that they have to do all the chores in the house, that they're still unpaid or not equitably paid, that they're responsible for childcare and all these things. So I don't understand what the social benefit of having a partner is if everyone in like this world complains about their partners nonstop. And I just use the term partner, and I have to like remind myself this just because of how it's being written. I hate how feminist language has erased traditional roles of husband and wife. Okay. And I know this is more broader and encompassing of individuals who aren't yet married. So boyfriends, fiancés, husbands, whatever, but still, like, a lot of these women, especially the ones who are married, are blasting husbands on social media. They're complaining all the time. So there are no social benefits of having a husband. If anything, it's been framed as a liability and a burden for women. So I don't understand that. And then she also says, not appear so boyfriend obsessed that they come across as quite culturally loserish. I don't know where that comes from. So that must be a Gen Z thing. Like, I don't understand why having a significant other makes you a loser. Like, we are in a global loneliness epidemic. Like, the Surgeon General in the United States has said so. People clearly want relationships with other human beings, and kind of like the penultimate relationship is being a romantic relationship. So there's nothing culturally loserish about finding a boyfriend who you aspire to then become who would you would aspire to eventually become your husband, right? Like, that's the whole point of like dating. It's you date to find someone you're compatible with, and then you go through the process and you get married. Like, that's the whole point. So it's, if you're saying having a boyfriend is loserish, then you're also saying implicitly here that being married is loserish. So this is part of a broader narrative trying to diminish the role of marriage and families in our society. So she says, in other words, in an era of widespread heterofatalism, women don't want to be seen as being all about their man, but they also want the clout that comes with being partnered. It's just, I don't understand, for one, how that has anything to do with heterofatalism. Heterofatalism is like this new made up thing where women are lamenting being heterosexual, and like heterosexually attracted to men because men are so awful. So I don't even know what she's trying to say there. Okay, so it goes on to reference a podcast called The Delusional Diaries that's put on by two New York-based influencers. I've never heard of this podcast, so I have no idea what it covers. But they discuss whether having a boyfriend is lame now. Why does having a boyfriend feel Republican? Read a top comment on one of these podcast episodes. Okay, like, we've completely politicized relationships now, and this is like pretty insidious and has been happening for some time, and it's been subtle, right? Like, if you remember last year's election after Donald Trump won, you had liberal commentators go on MSNBC and CNN and tell liberal voters it was okay to skip holiday gatherings with family members who voted for Trump. So like, creating a permissive environment to disengage from family, to become estranged to them, to shut them down. And this is happening. Like, younger adult children are just shunning their parents and their older relatives because of how they vote politically. And now having a boyfriend feels Republican. So it's like, we're not even at the point where we're still demonizing like stay-at-home moms and like traditional family values, where it's demonizing relationships in general. So if you have a boyfriend, you're not liberal enough. And you have to keep this in context of the current political zeitgeist, because the Democratic Party, well, do we even call it a Democratic Party anymore? It's basically the Socialist Party of America at this point. They basically are running a purity test of their constituents. So you have to check all the boxes on their ideological list of things they believe in order to be an adherent of that political party. Like, there's no centrist Democrat anymore. Like, you really have to think about that. Like, if you disagree on any of the key talking points, and this is not permitting biological men into women's locker rooms, this is, being more pro-life leaning, things like that automatically casts you out of the Democratic Party and the liberal cause. I mean, just look at J.K. Rowling and how she's been treated over the years as evidence of that. And so you can see how the purity test continues to coalesce around more extreme positions. And this is another example. Like, now it's not even just culturally encouraging women to pursue singleness. It's telling them, if you do not pursue singleness, if you have a boyfriend, you are no longer liberal enough. You are no longer one of us. And so women desire to be part of the tribe. They want to belong. And so if this is true, and this is and I'm right, and this is happening, like, you're going to have women who are choosing this involuntarily and probably unconsciously, simply because they want to continue belonging to the political party that puts them on the right side of history. Okay, so it goes on to say, even partnered women will lament men and heterosexuality, partly in solidarity with other women, but also because it is now fundamentally uncool to be a boyfriend girl. So they're framing it as two different things here. So solidarity with other women, so because so many women are single now, this person is arguing that women don't want to broadcast their relationships because it might make other girls feel bad. Okay, girl culture is all about being mean to one another. I've said this before. I'll say it again. I'll say it until I'm blue in the face. Go watch Mean Girls. Go watch the original one. It's a documentary, okay? It is everything you need to know about girl culture. Girls are awful to one another, and it doesn't stop in high school. It continues all the way up through adulthood, okay? So there's nothing that women don't want to be in solidarity with one another. There's no such thing as girl power. Like, they hate each other at their core. So that's a bullshit argument. But to, like, uncool to be a boyfriend girl, like, who makes these rules? I mean, people on social media, obviously, but it's just like, who came up with that? Okay, it says, it's not just in these women's imaginations. Audiences are icked out by seeing too much boyfriend content. I want to highlight this because, again, this is all from the perspective of social media, okay? All of her conclusions she is drawing here are observations she has made from influencers and social media content creators. Okay, so you probably have heard of the dead internet theory. If you haven't, it's basically this idea that nothing on the internet is actually real anymore. There are so many bots that are on the internet and they're engaging in social media channels that there's a good chance you're not actually interacting with a human being. And I've said this in other videos, and it's one of the reasons why I don't always I read comments. I do, so please don't think that I don't. But I don't always respond because it's hard to know, like, who's who anymore. And you have top people, folks like Elon Musk, top people out in Silicon Valley, who are coming out and saying, yeah, there's something to this dead internet theory is real. So assuming dead internet theory is real, knowing that there are bot farms in China and Russia, that these have been used politically to shape perspectives here in the United States, it's reasonable to assume there are bot farms that are being used to shape cultural and social opinions as well. So this person thinks that their audiences are icked out by seeing too much boyfriend content, but they don't actually know who their audiences are or if they're real to begin with. So this is what I'm saying, where social media amplifies things. Like, these people are drawing conclusions based on feedback they are getting through social media channels that might not be human in nature. They might be deliberately engineered to create social breakdown here in the United States. And that makes a lot of logical sense. If you haven't watched it, Yuri Bezmenov, I think that's what his name is, but he was a former KGB guy, and there's a video of him on YouTube who talks, he gave an interview, I think in the 80s, but he talks about this, how you break down a society and demoralize it. And so everyone in the United States thinks, okay, the US won the Cold War, hurrah, we beat communism. But in reality, if what he says in that interview is true, what the Soviets did, and I presume what the Chinese are probably doing now, is they have been playing the long game. They have been degrading our moral compass. They have been demoralizing us, making us feel defeated, and this has taken place over several generations, right? So they have been playing a game where they are trying to defeat and implode the United States internally through co-opting culture here that shapes the population and eventually gets the population to erode on itself. So if I were one of these people, right, like you just think strategically, one of the best ways to defeat your enemy is to cripple them demographically, right? Like when you have falling birth rates, when you have people who don't want to get married, you have a breakdown of the family, you have a breakdown of institutions, you have a breakdown of rule of law, which we're all seeing right now, but then you don't have a replacement population to keep your economy going. So it's important to think of this in like a bigger context. Like how much of this is women being women and putting other women down? And how much of this could be socially engineered? I'm going to talk about this more in another piece that follows up to this, but I keep that in the back of your mind because I don't think people are talking about the social engineering piece enough. And I think we exist in a culture that we think is organic, of our own creation. And I don't know that that is necessarily true anymore. And I think this is evidence of that. Okay. She says here, this is another content creator who's talking about how being single gives you the ultimate freedom to say and do what you want. I'm going to say freedom is tyranny. Like Jocko has said this, I believe this to be true, that discipline equals freedom. So discipline means adhering to boundaries, sticking to routine, confining yourself to a role, doing things you might not necessarily want to do, but constricting yourself in a way that allows you to create and participate in a meaningful way. I think discipline is key. And I think having ultimate freedom to do and say whatever you want, I don't think that's freedom. And I've personally lived it. I spent a year traveling the country, living in my car, could do whatever I want, go wherever I want, had no one to respond to, no one that I was accountable of. And like I had freedom. I could do whatever, right? But it wasn't a meaningful life. And at some point, and the travel influencers don't talk about this. At some point, you get burned out by traveling by yourself. At some point, another hostel, another bunk bed, they all look the same. You start to hate it. And the travel influencers won't talk about that. They'll just post pictures of how great things are and how wonderful their lives are. But deep down, a lot of them hate what they're doing. They just want to have a place where they call home, someone to come home to, someone to share a meal with, like at some point like there's a time and place for travel. Don't get me wrong. Like I definitely encourage it for anyone who can do it. But at some point, ultimate freedom is no longer freedom. It's a tyranny on your life and it destroys your soul. So I would challenge women to think deeply about that. Okay, so she says, from my conversations, one thing is certain, the script is shifting. Being partnered doesn't affirm your womanhood anymore. It is no longer considered an achievement, and if anything, it's become more of a flex to pronounce yourself single. It's not a flex to be single. Again, this is a narrative that is being pushed out into culture right now, and I think it's being pushed out by other women to make themselves feel better, to validate themselves. I just covered a couple of videos ago a opinion conversation that happened that the New York Times published amongst 3 women talking about why young people are struggling to get married, and one of the participants of that conversation is a single childless cat lady in her 50s, and the entire time she kept saying how satisfied she was with her choices in her life and how being single is satisfying. So you keep hearing that narrative pop up, and the thing is, the more it's covered in publications like the New York Times, the more it's covered here by opinion writers like this, and that it's covered in female-centric podcasts and by social media influencers, the more normalized it becomes. So women start aspiring to that because they think it's normal. They think it's a good thing. In reality, what I think is happening is these women are so deeply unsatisfied with their lives that they want to take other women down with them. And so they're creating this myth that being a childless cat lady is the most wonderful thing in the world. It's the most satisfying thing in the world. And that now being single is the flex and it's something to aspire to. And much the same way that these same feminist women pushed careerism in college, getting college degrees as the flex to one up stay at home moms, right? So, okay, being a mother is now shameful. You should be a career woman. Okay, well, now being married and partnered is shameful. You should be single. Like, this is what's happening. And I think it's deliberate. So she says, as straight women, we're confronting something that every other sexuality has had to contend with, a politicization of our identity. Heterosexuality has long been purposely indefinable, so it's harder for those within it and outside of it to critique it. However, as our traditional roles begin to crumble, maybe we're being forced to reevaluate our blind allegiance to heterosexuality. So this keeps coming up again, too. And this is part of that whole heterofatalism conversation. Again, I don't know where this is coming from. So it's not... So... And again, this is like a paradox, right? So it's okay, well, it's a flex to pronounce yourself single, but then, okay, being heterosexual is bad. So the implicit point there is that, well, maybe we should change teams and become lesbians. So then you're not single. Like, if you reject men and decide to have a same-sex relationship, it's still a relationship, right? So you're still acknowledging that relationships matter. You're just denouncing men in the process. So all of this is just filled with contradictions that make absolutely no sense here. Okay. She says this is also happening alongside a wave of women reclaiming and romanticizing their single life. Like I said, people are writing about this and trying to make it a thing. Where being single was once a cautionary tale, you'll end up a spinster with loads of cats. It is now becoming a desirable and coveted status, another nail in the coffin of a centuries-old heterosexual fairy tale that never really benefited women to begin with. Okay, why are we categorizing things as heterosexual now? Like, that's just weird to me too. Like, I hate that language. But yeah, it is a cautionary tale because that is what is literally going to happen. These women are going to become childless cat ladies. They're not going to have the friendships and the freedom that they think they have now, especially because this is happening alongside a massive structural shift within our economy where millions of these women are going to lose their jobs. AI, robotics, it's going to wipe these women out. So they are not going to have whatever financial means that they think they're going to have to be able to take care of themselves in their old age. It's very clear, like, to survive in this world, you need a team. You can't do it alone. And this is what's pushing. You can do it by yourself. You don't need no man. You know, you can take care of everything on your own. Being single is great. No. You need a team. You need a team. Everyone needs a team. Businesses have teams, sports leagues have teams. Everyone needs a team. You need someone on your team to help you. And so if you go through life alone, you're going to struggle because there are hurdles and barriers that are insurmountable to individuals. Like, biologically, evolutionarily, like, single people did not survive, right? They had to be part of the tribe. That's why we're hardwired as women to want to fit in. So I don't think this is something to celebrate. Like, these women are going to grow old. They're not going to have anything to live for. And at some point, like I said, like, same with travel. Like, at some point, going to brunch every Sunday is going to get old. Like, at some point, you're going to outgrow your frivolous Sex and the City, New York lifestyle that these women are living now, and they're going to be like, okay, now what? And they're not going to have the families that everyone else has, and they're going to feel like they're missing out because they're going to realize, oh, that's what matters, right? Your influencers, your social media followers aren't going to be there at your funeral, okay? They're not going to be there for you, And so I think this is something to really think about. Like we're here for a moment in time. Like, existence extends far beyond our individual personhood. We're here but for a moment in time, and it's not just about us. Like, there's so much more to life than just the here and the now, and you have to think of yourself in the context of that, and these women don't. Okay, so that's the end of the essay. Now let's dive into a follow-up to this. This was published on Substack by Rob Henderson. He does a lot of great work, but he says, is antinatalism a luxury belief? So he's going to break this down, and he's going to break this down keeping Dr. Danny Sulikowski's theory of reproductive suppression, manipulative reproductive suppression in context, and framing this as a deliberate effort by women to compete against and suppress reproduction of other women by promoting antinatalism. And this essay right here is a clear example. This is an anti-natalist, so an anti-life, anti-reproductive belief, anti-family. This does not promote getting partnered and having a family. This is all about being single and doing your own thing. So Let's dive in to what he has to say, because he covers a lot of really good stuff. And if you're not familiar with Dr. Sulikowski's work, I did a very long analysis of an interview she gave with Quillette. I will link that in the description below because I think it's fantastic. So in this piece, he talks about the essay that was published in Vogue, and he talks about how Dr. Danny Sulikowski posited a theory about reproductive suppression. So he argues that, and it argues that every animal, humans included, is in a reproductive competition. The genes that spread are the ones that lead to more offspring. If you have more children than average, your genes become more common in the next generation. If you have fewer, your genes become less common. Over many generations, the genes associated with successfully attaining a partner and having children have become widespread. So we are hardwired for partnership. And so he says this creates a pressure on individuals to win the reproductive race. But the problem with that is that organisms, so species like humans, have evolved strategies to reduce how many babies their competitors have. And so this is something that has been noticed specifically in primates, and so obviously extrapolated to apply to humans. And according to this theory, dominant females actively suppress the reproduction of lower status females, and they do this through inducing stress. So they will harass, intimidate, or exclude subordinate females to raise their stress hormones, specifically cortisol, and this will disrupt the reproductive system. I think the emphasis here should be on excluding, right? So yeah, there are girls who are mean and they do intimidate, but I think excluding women is far more impactful. Again, go watch Mean Girls. It's all about who is in and who is out. So there's an exclusive inclusion element to that. In human societies, high status women influence the reproductive choices of lower status women. So through this, high status women enforce social norms that discourage reproduction. They stigmatize pregnancies and motherhood. They pressure women to prioritize education over career and family. They prioritize education or career over family. They create an environment where having children seems like a failure rather than an achievement. They stigmatize relationships or tell you that having a boyfriend is embarrassing, just like this piece. And as a woman, I'll tell you, this is absolutely true. I went through all of my 20s believing this, that career was the most important thing. Education was most important. I had to excel in my education. And then I had to, get a career and do well in that. So everything I did focused around that, to the point where I really didn't date in college because I was so focused on those goals, career and education, that I saw having a boyfriend as a disruption to that. So I didn't even really date in college at all. And then obviously they create an environment where having children seems like a failure. This is true. Think of the language, how children are framed by feminist career women. It's all about how they're a burden, how they'll hold you back, how they'll limit your career potential. Like, that has always been the conversation. That is something I internalized because that's what was communicated to me. And so the question is, who are these high status women? It's women who are already in these positions of power, positions of cultural dominance, professional dominance, financial dominance. It's women who have climbed the career ladder for themselves, and they don't want anyone else to compete against them. And so they do this through culture and social pressure rather than direct physical intimidation. So in Dr. Danny Sulikowski's work, she says, men are hardwired for war, so men will physically engage with one another, whereas women are more subtle, will engage in cultural and social pressure. And so Rob Henderson says here, in contemporary settings, this plays out in workplaces and institutions. So women in positions of power, so think corporate leaders, senior academics, those who are influential media figures, they create the environments that make reproduction difficult for women below them. They do it through culture and expectation. So this entire time, women have been blaming the patriarchy, and they blame society, and they're like, okay, you're not giving us enough paid family leave, you're not paying us enough, blah, blah, blah. But really, it's women who have created these environments for other women. Because all of this, like paid family leave and stuff, like that used to exist, right? Before women entered the workforce, before we moved into more of like the shareholder corporate capitalist economy we have today. Like back in the day, like women would go off to work for, the back office of a company in much the same way men would go work at the GM assembly line. And like, if you had to go home and take care of your kid, there was no issue. Like, you did that. It's only more recently that things have changed. And a lot of this is being mediated by other women. in the office. I do want to call attention though. He says here that it's women in positions of power that are creating these environments. There's another theory that has come out called the Great Feminization Theory. And it complements this. It talks about how women, because they have ascended into positions of power, have created norms within institutions that feminize those institutions. And this is a really good example of that. Like, they have created new expectations and how organizations are supposed to behave. And it's because there are so many women in positions of power now than previously. Okay. So it talks here, women who prioritize family are passed over for promotions. The message is clear. Serious women don't have children. And this is coming out in girl boss culture. This is absolutely coming out in girl boss culture. You do not see women CEOs talking about their families. They don't talk about their kids. They don't bring their kids out. They don't highlight their kids. They only talk about themselves. And a lot of times, just look at examples. Like think to yourself, like, who's a top CEO or a female CEO that you respect and admire? Chances are that they either don't have children, they're not married, or if they were, they've gone through divorce. So they're not good on the relationship side of things, or they have a reputation for being very mean and cruel. You see this all the time. Just go on Glassdoor. Just go on Glassdoor and look and see. I worked at I was a freelance writer for a feminist digital publication in New York City, and the two CEOs of that company had that reputation. They were not considered to be kind to the very women that they employed. So I think this definitely happens, and again, it's not really talked about. Okay, so he says here, this explains something puzzling about modern feminism. Progressive feminists often criticize capitalism. They talk about how corporations exploit workers, how the pursuit of profit harms people, how we should value things over other than career choices. Yet the same voices insist that there's no higher priority for young women than organizing their lives around career. Again, the same thing. It's like they lament the patriarchy. They complain about how men are ruining everything. And yet the thing that they should prioritize is becoming more like men, going to a 9-to-5 career, climbing the corporate ladder just like men do. Instead of like owning their womanhood and diving deeper into becoming more feminine, these same women are telling young women to become more like men. And so he says many of these elite women have partners, many of them have children. They figured out how to balance career and family, or they have the resources to make it easier, but they don't advertise it. They don't tell young women who are married and have high levels of happiness. They emphasize the importance of career and burden of children. And the point of this is to suppress, it's to culturally and socially create expectations that suppress reproduction of lower status women. And so it makes it so that younger women like myself have internalized this and then, are like, okay, well, not going to get married, not going to, have family. That's it, just career. And this is happening to millions of women. And I wasn't aware this was happening. And I appreciate these theories coming to light now and people trying to wrap their head around this, because it gives me a little bit of solace to understand, like, maybe some of the choices I made as a 20-year-old weren't my own choices. And understanding that, I'm part of a broader social and cultural experiment that I wasn't fully consciously aware of. Okay. Okay, so one of the reasons why this is important, and this is what Dr. Sulakowski talks about in her theory, is that women basically determine how fast populations grow. They determine the future, right? And so, like, men, for better or for worse, are expendable, like, because men can reproduce at any age. Like, you can be an 80-year-old man and have a baby. They're a bit more expendable than women. Women are valued because they are born with a finite number of eggs and they have a finite window of time in which they can reproduce. And they're the only ones who can create life as of right now. And so in that regard, women have significantly more value than men, because he says here, knocking a woman out of the mating pool is a big deal, because men can have a ton of kids and women can't. And so a woman has two ways to win competition in terms of mating. She can have more children than average. So if you want to pass on your genes, just have far more children, or you can convince other women to have fewer children. So if you can lower the background rate, the average number of children other women have, you improve your relative position without having more kids yourself. So this is what modern women have adopted, is instead of just reproducing as many and having as many kids as possible, they're trying to make it so that they can produce less and have fewer competition or less competition by convincing other women to have fewer children. Okay, so this is an interesting thing. So apparently there was a series of papers that were written by Dr. Sulakowski and other female academics that talked about measures of intrasexual competition, so competition, men to men and women to women. So they talked in the paper about having female participants and getting their hair done. And so they asked for things about like, would you hire an attractive colleague, or like, would you recommend shorter haircuts for women? And they found that there is an inverse correlation between age and the competition. So older women compared with older women, younger women reported stronger competitive feelings with other women. And I think that's partly because of, you're in a stat, like when you're younger, when you're in your 20s and 30s, your fertility window is open. So like you have to compete for a mate if you want to reproduce. And I find it fascinating that they looked at hair. They talked about like whether or not they were to recommend shorter haircuts for women. This is something I have always thought about whenever I've gone to get my haircut. And I thought it was just like me being crazy. And maybe it is. Maybe a little bit of it is. But I'm very particular about where I get my haircut because I am deeply concerned the person with the scissors could ruin my hair and make me ugly. And this has just always been like, just like an inherent fear I've always had. And maybe it's completely irrational, but based on this, maybe not. But you see this now too. Like you see the uglification, if that's a word, of liberal women, like women with like the weird haircuts, dyeing their hair, tattoos everywhere that don't really make sense, the septum piercing. You see liberal women in particular have been trying to make themselves as ugly as possible so they don't attract men. And this is part of the intrasexual competition, but I have always been wary of that when I go to a hair studio to get my haircut. So when I'm like evaluating a place to go, I will look up like who the stylist is, like who, like their background, their ideology, because I'm concerned. I genuinely, and again, like maybe it's irrational, but I'm concerned like someone that has a particular ideology might deliberately mess up my hair. And this is like, hair is just so important to women and beauty standards. So I think this is really interesting that they covered that, because this is something I have always been wary of and felt and didn't really understand why. And maybe it is irrational, but maybe there's also something to it as well. Okay, so it goes back to, women with boyfriends declaring they have a boyfriend is embarrassing. So that's because like they're trying to stigmatize other people doing what they've already done because they want to reduce the competition, especially for the future too. Like the goal here, like think from an evolutionary perspective, you want to get your genes passed down. So you want to make the future successful for your children. So that's what you're really doing. You're not just trying to hurt women in the present. You're trying to help your children in the future by reducing the number of the amount of competition from low status children that they have to compete with. Okay, so they say that the state reason solidarity, they don't want to make single women feel bad. But obviously, like, that's not true. They talk about how like pursuing a relationship makes you look desperate, old-fashioned, or politically suspect. So they're trying all these new ways, like I was saying before, to frame it. But the elite women are the ones in relationships. The idea here is to lower, make yourself more competitive, lower the background rate, so that you can improve your competition with others. And so one of the things he talks about here, and Dr. Sulakowski talks about this as well, is in the past, elite women were able to maintain a competitive advantage over non-elite women based on the infrastructure of the time. So if you were a wealthier, well-status person, you had better access to medical care, sanitation, housing, whatever. So back in the day when there were high infant mortality rates, your children had a greater chance of success than a peasant. Well, now that we live in the 21st century and there are far fewer poor people who are, struggling from lack of, healthcare and sanitation, like Yeah, there's people who are struggling, but comparatively, if you look at it from the past to today, like far less, right? Like just medical standards have improved. Everyone is living in better conditions. Everyone has more access to food. Like he says here, things have leveled off, and competition, like the women who have the competitive advantage in the past, no longer have a competitive advantage today. So it says here, but when a whole society develops, the advantage disappears. Now everyone has clean water, everyone has antibiotics. In rich first world countries, a poor woman's children survive at nearly the same rate as a rich woman's children. So they have to find a way to suppress women, and so that's what they're doing. So they've created all of these different narratives, and so one of the narratives he highlights here is the cost of raising children. So it says, you're supposed to give your kids, have a big house, you can give them their own bedroom, they have to travel, do sports, music and ballet lessons, go to college, and you're judged if you fail your children. So elite women have set standards. And you see this, like, think about your own life, right? Like your expectations from your childhood on what you wanted and what you expected out of life compared to the elite equivalents in your own like community that you were raised in. You see this. I definitely saw it, where I grew up. Elite women have set the standards, and that they have implicitly bullied non-elite women by requiring children to be raised properly, and there's a cost associated to it. So they're imposing costs onto raising children. And I would say he doesn't cover it here. I would go further to say that they're imposing costs on getting marriage too. I'm planning on doing a separate video on this, so if you're interested, please leave a comment and let me know. But this is happening with marriages. So the average price of a wedding in the United States is about $36,000, which is just absolutely mind-numbing to think about. But after going through the process myself of planning a wedding, like I can see why it's happening. One of the things I observed and I noticed is that most of the vendors I interacted with were other women. Not all, but a good portion. When you're getting a dress, alterations, hair, makeup, venues are usually managed by some sort of like wedding coordinator, all that kind of stuff. Everything is controlled, not everything, but a lot of the stuff is controlled by women. And I noticed that a lot of the exorbitant price tags associated with having a woman are implemented by other women. So just to give you an example, I wanted to get my makeup done because I like hate doing my own makeup. I'm not really confident in it. So I'm like, okay, it's a big day, special day. I wanted to get my makeup done. And so I was looking around for like a makeup person to come and for like an hour, right? Just like do my makeup, nothing crazy, just a natural look, nothing wild, right? And so I reached out to several different folks, and I got a quote from a makeup studio in the town where we got married, and this woman wanted $800 to do my makeup. $800. And I want to say that was the only vendor that had a price tag like that, but it wasn't. Most of the hair people that I reach out to, the hair salons, and the ones that are recommended on websites like The Knot, right, that are referred as like preferred wedding vendors, they had minimums that were $600, $700, $800. I didn't have a bridal party. My best friend was the matron of honor. That was it, right? I didn't have a bridal party. There weren't lots of people to get their hair done. It was really just me. And so I had hair people who, minimums were $600, $700, $800. If it was a Saturday wedding, it would have been over $1,000. So those are just some examples, right? But it's not just the costs associated of raising children and properly doing so. There's also the cost of getting married itself. And you see this on social media and how like having a wedding has become this entire extravagant thing where it's not even just like the wedding itself. There's an entire engagement season. You're expected to do photo shoots and have like effectively costume changes, like have different dresses and outfits, have parties for all along the way. You go on to TikTok, you'll see influencers in particular. They'll have these lavish parties, bachelorette parties with members of their bridal party. They'll have all these goodie bags with all this branded stuff. Like scroll through and you'll see all these, lavish weddings at like castles and big places, just to call one out. This is one of the girls from that podcast. Her name's Just Jazzy IDK. She does the Delusional Diaries podcast. So the podcast that talked about how like having a partner is bad. This individual got married in back in May. So she's married now, and I don't have Instagram, so I can't click to like show you more. But she got married at a castle in Long Island where Taylor Swift filmed her Blank Space music video. So that gives you an idea. Okay. So if you want to know why like women are struggling with relationship, there is all of this pressure to spend money on bullshit things. And this is coming from somewhere, and it's coming from elite women. It's coming from influencers. It's coming from professional women. It's coming from people with higher status, financially, socially, culturally, whatever, telling other women like me, this is how things are supposed to be. You're supposed to provide your kids this. You're supposed to have a wedding like this. And if you can't do that, if you can't live up to that expectation, you suddenly don't want to do it. You don't want to do things. And you feel ashamed and you feel guilty. And that's the reality of it. Like, I'll be totally honest, like there were some people I would have considered inviting to my wedding, but I didn't, because I knew it wouldn't live up to their expectation. So rather than have to deal with them commuting or traveling a distance to come and be disappointed, it was easier not to. And that's the reality. That's the reality of what this is doing. So it's not even just children. It's affecting starting at marriage as well. And so, as he says here, it's pricing out the competition. Poor working class families looking at the cost of acceptable child rearing and marriage decide they can't afford it. This is one of the reasons why the birth rate has dropped among low income women more than high income women. The birth rate among women used to be similar across the socioeconomic spectrum. So elite women have used pricing and social pressure as a way to restore their competitive advantage by making reproduction socially acceptable only if you can afford an expensive lifestyle, or only if you can afford to provide your kids what is acceptable according to their standards. Okay, so elite women use their status and resources to raise the bar for acceptable motherhood, and this suppresses reproduction among women who can't meet the new standards, and it works. As societies develop, women gain more time and resources. With lower infant mortality, they spend less time pregnant caring for babies who might not survive, so they enter the workforce in larger numbers. This means women gain influence over institutions, schools, hospitals, corporations, government agencies, nonprofits. Again, the great feminization hypothesis talks about this, and those institutions change. So they adopt perspectives and priorities that reflect female concerns and female perspective. Again, this is like, think about this too within the broader feminist narrative. All these women are complaining about still how they're not being paid as much as men, how there's all this like gobbledygook with the patriarchy. Okay, women are now in positions of power, and those women in those positions of power have done absolutely nothing to solve these problems that feminist women lament about on a daily basis. So if women are being so successful and they're succeeding and they're climbing the corporate ladder, why haven't they closed the pay gap for other women? I mean, the pay gap doesn't exist, but think about it, like theoretically, why haven't they closed it? It's because they don't want to. It's all part of this competition. Okay. It says universities, which are increasingly influenced by women, produce ideologies about gender, family, and reproduction. Those ideologies spread through other institutions. Schools teach them. Corporations adopt them as policies. And we've seen this play out, right? This is how wokeism became a thing. So you got it in the universities. You taught to a bunch of students over a generation. They grew up. They went into corporate America. They started pushing DEI and all these different policies. And here we are. And so this is absolutely happening. So he talks here about how antinatalism might be a luxury belief. And this is his whole shtick is luxury belief. So he says, a luxury belief is an idea that confers status on the people who hold it while inflicting costs to people lower on the social ladder. The elite can afford to advocate these beliefs because they're insulated from the consequences. So that it's like rules for thee, not for me. So they're not going to be, the ones who've already had kids, they're not going to be impacted by the emotional consequences and the personal consequences of not having kids, right? They're not going to feel the effects of becoming a childless cat because they already have kids. So he says many women promoting anti-natalist ideas aren't consciously trying to sabotage anyone. They've internalized these beliefs for themselves. They've been convinced that career advancement matters more than family, that children are burdens, that traditional motherhood is oppressive. And I can tell you from experience, this is absolutely true. This is the messaging that women are being given. And so one of the things he talks about as well is that part of this anti-reproductive narrative is toxic masculinity. So there's all of these things that are happening. There's the narrative like promoting singleness, there's the costs of getting married and raising children, but then there's also framing men as bad and evil. And so it says women can disrupt other women's mate preferences through toxic masculinity. And this is a discourse that demonizes traditional masculine traits. So protection has been seen as controlling, confidence becomes arrogance, ambition becomes aggression. So the things that like up until a few minutes ago would have made a man attractive as a partner and father are now presented as red flags. And you in the audience know this very well. Like this is absolutely true. So part of this, like you all are collateral damage in this, and I hope you're aware of that. Part of this is framing men as evil creatures in order to convince lower status women not to want them, right? And so this is why you're seeing a rise in heterophiliacism and women lamenting their heterosexuality because they have been told that men are bad, men are evil, and so you are the collateral damage. In all of this. And so he says here, this is reproductive sabotage by proxy. If you convince another woman to choose a lower quality mate or forgo relationships altogether, you reduce her chances of having children, which in turn reduces men's chances of having children too. It increases competition among men. And so this is why I think men are struggling right now. So he says here, none of this is conscious intent. And I think this is really important. It's not like, there isn't like a boardroom with women who came up with this grand plan to sabotage other women. Like it's happening subconsciously. And like I said, I don't necessarily know if it's happening because of evolutionary biology or if it's a deliberate socially engineered plot to convince us to stop reproducing, to change the demographics of America so it's easier to defeat it. Like I don't know which it could be both. I think it could be both. Oh, so it talks here, it says research shows antinatalist beliefs correlate with dark triad personality traits. So dark triad is psychopathy, Machiavellianism, and narcissism. So people with high psychopathy show a striking correlation with believing it's wrong to have children. So the people who are becoming antinatalists are also people who have dark triad traits. So there is definitely manipulative element here, which is why it's not just reproductive suppression, it's manipulative reproductive suppression. So that shows there's an evolutionary component of this. So he concludes this by talking about no one here should be assigned moral blame. And I think this is really important because I think a lot of the conversation right now, especially for men, is feminist women are bad. Like they have this coming. They deserve this. I think a lot of women don't know this is happening to them. I don't think high status women are necessarily conscious that they are suppressing the reproductive like impulses of lower status women. And I don't think lower status women recognize that they are being manipulated. I think this is happening subconsciously. So he says, the tiny group of elite women who promote these ideas while quietly having children themselves may bear some responsibility, but they almost certainly don't fully understand what they're doing or why. What we're observing in an evolutionary system that operates largely outside conscious awareness, it's a system that emerges from the logic of reproductive competition. So it's not a conspiracy, it's just an emergent pattern that repeats because it works evolutionarily. Most individual women, most people in general, aren't thinking about any of this. They're responding to social pressure, they're trying to fit in, they're pursuing what society tells them is valuable. So if society is composed from women, right? So if women are telling other women what is valuable, and career and college have been deemed socially more valuable than family and marriage, that is what women are going to choose because they want to be included. They want to be part of the tribe. And so women like me, younger women have responded to this. Obviously, I've made different choices in my life to get me off that trajectory, but not all women have. Not all women are aware of what is happening. So birth rates are continuing to fall. The population ages. Economic system built on growth begin to fail. Institutions struggle to maintain themselves. Social cohesion weakens. Eventually, the system becomes unsustainable. Again, this is why I don't know that this is just evolutionary, but I think it could also be socially engineered by an adversary as well. We have to understand that this isn't just women deliberately doing this to other women. Like this is happening largely outside of consciousness. So what do we do about it, right? Like we have to change the messaging, and we have to put a check on this. And I think we have to change how we talk about motherhood and how we talk about womanhood in culture. And this is why I think it's important to push back against the trans movement and push back against letting men into women's spaces, because we have to defend the barrier between men and women so we can defend womanhood, right? The moment we're equal, womanhood goes away, right? So there's nothing special about being a woman. So we have to defend that. I think culturally we have to celebrate motherhood, and we have to celebrate getting married. So, every time I see conversations come up where, I see liberal women talking about this, like, oh, why do we celebrate these things? They're not that important. It's like, no, they are. Like, we have to push back. We have to check these narratives and push back against this. But culturally, we need more films, and we need more music, and we need more influencers who are like, no, being a mother is a good thing. This is something I aspire to. This is great. We need to celebrate more of that. And I think that's really important. Yeah. And so he says we need to make motherhood genuinely valued and supported, not just praised in the abstract while being punished in practice. We need to lower the artificial barriers to family formation, the inflated standards for acceptable child rearing, economic pressures, the cultural messaging that represents children as obstacles to fulfillment. So we need to change the cultural narrative. And like I said before, that means amplifying pro-family voices and putting a check on these antinatalist views and confronting them. But I think for you, especially the guys watching this, I think you're right to be frustrated. I completely empathize with you. I understand it's, the environment right now isn't conducive to relationships. I totally get that. But if you do want a relationship, if you do aspire to get married and have kids someday, keep all of this in context. Like, the things you are seeing coming from the woman sphere right now, the women participating in this might not actually understand what they're doing. Like, they are as much victims of this as they are proponents of it. And they don't really understand what they're doing. They don't understand that they're being manipulated. I think all of us in our heads think, oh, I went to college, or I did this, I did that, therefore I'm an elite. No, you're not. Just because, you got a bachelor's degree at some big university and maybe you work at a tech company, like, you're not elite. A lot of these women think they are elite, and they're not. And so I think, checking your ego and recognizing your own social status, I think is part of this. But just acknowledging that not all women are like this. Again, voices like this essay, this writer here, stuff like this gets amplified because there's an economy to amplify it, right? And the algorithms boost it. But not all women think like this. But the more that these messages are disseminated across culture, the more lower status women are going to believe it, because it becomes normalized, and it's the thing that they think they're supposed to believe to be successful. And that's what they want. They want to be successful. They're programmed for success. The problem is that we have confused success as career and college, and not family and motherhood, right? So we've confused that for women, so they don't understand what necessarily success is. But I think there are women out there who are waking up, who understand what is happening, and they're taking something about it. And I'm evidence of this, right? Like I said, in my 20s, believed all this gobbledygook, and was on the path to not have a family and not have, get married. And I, had my own awakening. I was like, okay, not going to become a childless cat lady. Literally packed up my life, moved halfway across the country to a city I had never I lived in. I visited once, but moved to Texas, and, here I am. So I think there's more women like me, and I think you have to find those women. And I think you're not going to find them in cities like LA or New York or Washington, D.C. or Boston or Chicago, because that's where culture is heavily concentrated. And so you really see women trying to participate and fit in at a higher degree. You're going to find women in smaller cities who are outside and slightly removed from cultural epicenters, and who have a willingness and have obviously suggested they have a willingness to explore something different, because they're not, struggling to be a girl boss in New York City, right? So I would look outside the big cities. Look for women who have left. Look for women who are renouncing this and denouncing this. And I think the more contrarian opinions, like the one I'm sharing here, the one that Rob Henderson has shared in his piece, I think the more that gets amplified and shared, and that women see examples of other women, living a happy, fulfilling life outside of the 9 to 5 career. That's my hope. My hope is, maybe I can hopefully help be an example for some of these women and show that it's possible to escape this and not be part of this and have a good life, and create an alternative narrative for them to listen to. So, I think we have a lot of work to do. And I would encourage you not, your frustration is valid. But don't pin all the blame on women at the same time. I think there are the women who aren't doing anything to help themselves, and that is, on them. But I think there are women who are caught in the midst of this. They don't realize it. And deep down, I think they do want families, they do want relationships, but they don't know socially how to do so, right? Because we live in a society that tells them their worth and their value is predicated on their career, not family. So I think it takes men and women working together to reshape this narrative, and, rebuilding communities and getting outside of this media echo chamber. We need to get out of this. This is not working for us. So I think real life engagements and interactions, community, and all that good stuff will help rebuild relationships. So that's what I have for you today. If you enjoyed this, again, I would love it if you'd like and subscribe. That definitely helps elevate content like this. So, again, women can have an opportunity to see this and hopefully start thinking critically about what they believe. And I would love to know what you think. Definitely share some of your thoughts in the comments below, both about the Vogue piece, but also the female reproductive suppression, how women are manipulating one another to convince them not to have children. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next video.